The ocean covers 70% of the globe. It gives us oxygen and food and millions of jobs. It brings joy and shapes our climate and weather. The ocean is life, and it belongs to everyone. Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution is the world's independent leader in ocean discovery, exploration, and education, working to understand and sustain one of humanity's most precious common resources. Join us today for our ocean, our planet, and our future.
Welcome to Ocean Encounters, an event series from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, or WHOI, as we like to call it for short. Tonight's program is Becoming a Marine Biologist, What It Takes and Where It Can Take You. My name is Veronique LaCapra, and I'll be your host for tonight. WHOI's Ocean Encounters events are made possible in part by the Avatar Alliance Foundation and Dalio Philanthropies, so thank you to them. And our 5th season of Ocean Encounters is also an endorsed activity of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. Those of you joining us online and who are familiar with Ocean Encounters will notice that things look a little different tonight. It won't be quite the same rich visual experience that you're used to with Ocean Encounters, so I apologize for that. But there's a great reason for the season finale. For one time only, our guests and myself are here in Woods Hole in Redfield Laboratory, which has been home to WHOI's biology department since the 1960s. And best of all, we have an in-person audience here with us. Give yourselves a hand. As usual, our guests will be taking questions from all of you throughout the evening. For those of you in the room, it's easy. Just raise your hand and one of my colleagues will bring you a microphone. Be sure to wait to have the microphone because otherwise the folks online won't be able to hear you. For those of you joining us on Zoom, if you'd like to participate in our live Q&A, please use the Q&A function and type your question in the window that appears. You might be more used to the chat function in Zoom, but for tonight, please use the Q&A function instead. We often get hundreds of questions, and I anticipate that tonight will be no exception. So forgive us if we don't get to your question while we're live. We are recording this event, and the recording will be made available on the whoi.edu website. We have a great crowd here in Redfield tonight. And I wanted to share that more than 3,000 people registered to join us on Zoom tonight. So we are in very good company. Here in Redfield, we have students from area schools. I would like everybody who's a student or a teacher on the count of 3 to yell out your school name. Okay? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Excellent. Love it. All right, let's get started. As a child who hasn't dreamed of becoming a marine biologist, right, getting to explore the ocean and see all the amazing animals that live there, but what does it really take to be a marine biologist, and what would your career look like once you got the degree? Well, tonight we have 3 marine biologists joining us. They're going to talk about their quite different career paths and how they got to where they are today. They are Nate Formel, Brandon Jones, and Ann Tarrant. Welcome, everybody. All right, so let's just start out by having you each introduce yourselves a little bit. We're going to really dig into your careers over the course of the evening, but for now, just give us a little taste of what you do. Let's start with Brandon, and then Ann, and then Nate.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. So again, my name is Brandon Jones, and I'm here in the capacity of President-elect for the American Geophysical Union, or AGU. And AGU is the largest professional society for earth and space scientists, so that includes ocean sciences. And so that's what I've been doing for the last year almost, and have 5 more years in that volunteer role coming up. But my day job that pays the bills is that I'm a program director at the National Science Foundation and the director for geosciences.
Yeah, and I'm a scientist here at Woods Hole Oceanographic in the biology department. And so I do two different things. The first thing is I run a lab where I do research on invertebrate animals. So some of the animals I work on are sea anemones that live in the salt marsh, and some of you might have seen them. So there we're actually doing an experiment with the anemones in the marsh. I also study plankton, zooplankton animals that live in the open ocean. And then the other part of my job is I'm also the Associate Dean of Academic Programs, so I help to administer mostly our graduate program in ocean science and engineering.
Right, and Nate?
Hey everyone, my name is Nate Formel. I'm a research assistant here at WHOI in the Sensory Ecology and Bioacoustics lab with Dr. Aaron Mooney. As the lab name kind of implies, the research we do is related to studying sound in a lot of different environments, but mainly marine environments, trying to understand how animals are affected by sound and how sound is incorporated in their interactions with their environment. So that's my role at WHOI.
Nate, did you grow up by the ocean?
Only a little bit. I was actually born down in Puerto Rico and got exposed to the ocean, but when I was almost 6, we moved up to upstate New York, very landlocked, fresh water from there on out, but I had an introduction early on.
Anne, what about you?
No, I grew up in Illinois with cornfields. I'll tell you like a little short snippet that I went to college in Miami, which is by the ocean. And my first day of class, they said, oh, we're going to have a field trip to the mangroves, which are, you guys might know, mangroves are these coastal trees. I did not know that. I was like, okay, we're going on some field trips to see some things. I don't know.
Yeah. And Brandon?
Like Ann, I grew up in the Midwest in southwestern Ohio, Springfield, Ohio, in between Dayton and Columbus, so landlocked, no ocean, but streams.
All right, so none of you really grew up by the ocean. What got you interested in marine biology then? Sorry, Anne, let's go with you.
Oh, yeah. So I did love the pool. So I was a lifeguard. I was on the swim team. In school, I liked animals, so I liked learning about animals in biology class. Then I was excited about, Illinois is a lovely place, but I was excited about the adventure of going somewhere different and trying something new. So I had the chance to go to school in Miami, and I got to go to Australia when I was in school, and I like the idea of exploring, I think.
Brandon, how about you?
Yeah, so my family took me fishing a lot in those areas of Ohio, and I would always think about what's going on in the ocean if I'm seeing these kinds of animals in freshwater bodies. And then, of course, now I'm dating myself. I would go home and watch Jacques Cousteau, and that would really spark the interest in wanting to pursue an ocean career.
Okay.
Some do, yeah. I saw some of the adults that I saw.
All right. So I think wanting to be a marine biologist is a little bit like wanting to grow up to be, I don't know, an astronaut or a movie star. A lot of people think about it, but then not many people actually follow through. So I want to know what motivated each of you to actually stick with it. Brandon, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think one of the main things, because I always liked science, but was when I made the connection that science could be useful for people. So it was fun to discover and and answer questions and be curious. But when I made the connection that science can be applied to societal issues, then that sparked that retention mechanism for me to want to pursue it.
Nate, what about you?
For me, I got into marine science kind of as a got to do something, and I really like science. I love the ocean. I think I definitely like swimming and playing in the water. So it seemed like a career that could hold my interest and kind of a fun thing to do along the way. And I didn't think I was going to cut it as like a magician or maybe a photographer. So, but once I actually started the coursework where I actually got to do marine science and learn about it and be in the field doing it, at that point the interest took care of itself. It was incredibly stimulating, and then obviously I'm really happy that that's the step I took in that direction towards marine science because it was the right one for me at least.
I think I may have made us skip a visual. Did we see one of Nate's early childhood
This is me learning the art of marine science here. Astoria, it's actually relatively locally. I went to Northeastern University.
I don't know if we can go back to it, but
this
anyway.
is out in Maine. These are my introductions to water appreciation. Going fishing and swimming in upstate New York. You can see I have my swimming goggles and snorkel ready to go. Fearless explorer.
Excellent. Excellent. All right, I want to see if we have any questions in the audience. So if you're in the room, raise your hand. Danielle Fino, our Chief Communications Officer, is fielding online questions. So if you've got one, Danielle, raise your hand. Yes.
Hi again.
Hi.
So what were some of your biggest inspirations when you decided that you'd become a marine biologist?
Yeah, good question. Who wants to take that one?
Well, I'll jump in. So I had a lot of family support. I had a lot of support from folks in the community. I remember, I'll share the story and I'll let others chime in. My pastor at the time, he asked me, I was probably 9 or 10, and he asked me what I wanted to be, and I said oceanographer. I didn't even know what that meant. I just knew. So I said oceanographer, and he just looked at me and said, well, you're going to have to move from Ohio. And I was like, yeah, I think I am. And so family support, community support, that let me know that, you know, if I could move forward in the stream, there were people that had my back.
Anybody want to add anything?
Yeah, I think one thing was when I was an exchange student in Australia, when I was undergrad, I was doing some volunteer work in a lab and taking classes, and someone kind of pointed out to me that one of my instructors and the person I was working in the lab, they were some of the people who discovered that corals have a mass spawning. I don't know if you know about this, like there's certain nights where all the corals are spawning into the environment. And, you know, most people didn't know about that until these people that I met discovered it and kind of learned about it. And so it kind of helped me understand that, like, science is a real thing, that people are still making discoveries.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Danielle.
Okay, here's a really important one. Michael asks, what's your favorite marine animal?
Excellent.
Let's
go down the line.
That one I've got ready to go. If you guys don't know what they are, nudibranchs are this incredible marine organism. They're these little slugs, which at first you're like, oh, slug, that's disgusting. Don't be like that. Slugs are animals too. They deserve our respect. But these ones are incredibly ornate and colorful, and they crawl all over the bottom. And when you see pictures, they're so magnificent, you assume they're a little bit bigger, but when you actually see them, they're, you know, a section of your pinky. That's all they are, but they're enough to captivate your attention. They're really amazing. And I will spend hours underwater hunting for these things to take their photos because they're that cool. Easy question.
Brandon?
No, that's a tough one. All the ones that are edible. That was, yeah.
What kind of marine biologist are you?
You're right. I know that's terrible, eating my specimens. I think I would have to say the animals that exist at the hydrothermal vents. That's just a unique.
Explain what a hydrothermal vent is.
Hydrothermal vent. Oh boy, yes. Hydrothermal vents are areas in the ocean floor where the ocean is spreading, and the magma is just under that area, and that cold, deep ocean water gets superheated, and then it comes back out in like a plume, and the solids, because there's pressure and temperature and such, the solids all start to collect in that plume, and it makes a big chimney. And there's a lot of what is called chemosynthesis that happens at those hydrothermal vents, and life exists down there through that chemosynthetic process.
Right, so animals living off of chemicals
instead of light.
Water instead of light. All right, so you're all marine biologists, but your careers have followed really different paths, and I'd like you to talk a little bit more about that and how you got to where you are today. Nate, you're the earliest in your career, so why don't we start with you?
Sure. So I told you guys I went to Northeastern University. I started the marine science track there. They have a great program called the 3 Cs program. Kind of takes you around the world to travel and learn. And as a function of that, I got introduced to Catalina Island. So when I graduated, I went out there and started teaching marine science and island ecology to school groups coming out. I had kind of been trained with the idea that if I wanted to continue in research, I needed that graduate degree. So I came back across to Miami, and I went to graduate school there to get my master's. And while I was there, I studied coral reefs mainly. coral reef ecology, and a little bit of coral restoration. Moved back west, jumped over the ocean out to Hawaii, and I worked out there doing more outreach and education and a little bit of work with the state agency out there to monitor coral reefs. And then I jumped back again, back to Miami, a lot of traveling back and forth. And I worked there for NOAA for the last 5 years or so. And I was working in a lab that studies ocean acidification, but also ways to improve coral restoration efforts, kind of improving the toolkit for that. That was nice to kind of get back to what I was really interested in, trying to find a way to help coral survive. And then over the last year, I moved up to WHOI here, and now I'm in a bioacoustics research lab, and I still get to work with coral reefs, but I've diversified my study organisms. Now I get to work with a lot of other invertebrates and some fish, maybe some marine mammals if I play my cards right. So that's been my windy path back and forth across the Western Hemisphere.
All right. Anne, how about you?
Yeah, so some of the same places as Nate. So I, again, did my undergraduate work in Florida, and I got really interested in coral reefs. So I went to graduate school in Hawaii to really focus on coral biology, and that's what I really studied. And then I got so excited, I got what's called a postdoctoral position at WHOI. So I've been here over 20 years. I came here as a postdoc, and once I came here, my research really diversified. I got more into molecular biology. I started going to sea and studying plankton, all kinds of things. And then about 2 years ago, I started as associate dean, so moved into that area.
Brandon?
Yeah, so I did undergrad at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. And even though I was interested in oceanography, Lincoln didn't have an oceanography program, so I was in pre-med. But my advisor happened to be a larval ecologist, and so that's where I got my first experiences in research with him. I finished in Lincoln and went to the University of Delaware College of Marine Studies for my master's. Once I finished there, I taught high school in Maryland for 5 years, teachers. And then after teaching, I went back to the University of Delaware to work on my PhD, finished there, and I went to the Environmental Protection Agency. I think there might be a picture of Lisa Jackson at the time, who was the administrator there during most of my tenure at EPA. And then from EPA, I went to NSF, and now I'm at the National Science Foundation, as I mentioned before. And during my time at NSF is when I became involved in AGU leadership. So that's my windy path as well.
We're seeing photos already, but help us visualize what a day at work is like for you. So what's a day in the life of Brandon Jones?
Oh. So with AGU, there's a lot of reading materials, a lot of calls and Zoom, so that's not the fun stuff. But focusing on how to support the members of the organization and what it is they do in their careers, but to advance the earth and space sciences, to obviously working on the forefront of science, working to be strategic in the programming that AGU can offer the members, and then learning about the financials and other aspects of being involved in an organization of that size that I didn't learn in any of my other kind of career experiences. So it's been a great professional development experience for me, but it is busy because I still have the NSF day job to do, but I'm learning a lot and I'm liking it.
And how about you? What's a day in the life like for you?
Yeah, so there's a lot of days that you have meetings or computer work or administration, but like the exciting days are when I get to do something in the lab myself, and more that's actually working with students or other people, sort of helping them to do research or doing things collaboratively. So that's like a really exciting day. I was actually on a ship doing seagoing research, so sometimes we get to do that too.
Yeah, people may not realize this, but research vessels have labs built into them so that whatever people are collecting at sea, right, they can take right into the lab and start processing it right there. Nate?
So a day for me as a research assistant, a lot of what I do is helping facilitate the research to get it done. So I might be in the field getting ready to go scuba diving to survey coral reefs, or put out some of our acoustic recorders to understand what's happening on that coral reef soundscape. Or I might be doing that locally, something similar to that. I might be stuck in the lab trying to figure out how to do these things, trying to come up with some tools, maybe engineering new tools The one on the side here, the thing that kind of looks like a lollipop, half a lollipop, maybe a mushroom. It's a prototype for a passive acoustic monitoring device we're working on.
Okay, you have to explain what that means.
So what we do is basically we listen in the water. It might not seem like you're doing much, but sound travels so well in the water that you actually have a pretty broad area that you can listen to. And then if you can figure out what you're listening to, it's a really, really efficient, cost-effective monitoring tool. I don't have to be there. I just have to have my recorder there. And it can either send me the information like this tool does, or I can come back down and retrieve it and glean a lot of information from an audio recording. Not just that I'm sitting there rocking out to the coral reef. I'm actually learning some information about the site, which is an incredible tool. And if we can really learn to harness that, we're going to be doing some amazing things. So that's what we're working on there. But because we do that, we also collect these massive data sets of audio and video data, and a lot of my job is also organizing and figuring out ways to kind of streamline analysis for that, because not many people want to sit there and parse through hours and hours and hours of video or audio footage, no matter how cool it sounds. It'd be really tedious work. So that's another part of my job. My tan's not as good from the data organization, but it's part of the job, and it's still pretty enjoyable to figure those solutions out.
That's actually one of the big challenges of science right now, is we can collect so much data, much more than we could in the past, but it's figuring out automated ways to process all that so we can actually get some useful information out of it. Right?
Yeah.
So your careers all sound fascinating and great, but no job is without its challenges, right? So what are some of the biggest challenges you've overcome in your career or had to deal with? Nate, let's start with you this time.
For me, I was thinking about this, and it's kind of a pro and a con, because on one hand, I get excited about traveling, and it's really exciting, but to take advantage of all these opportunities, sometimes you'll be away and traveling for months at a time, leaving behind family, friends, loved ones, right? You're trying to further your career, but it does come with some sacrifice to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. So you have a picture of me, angsty 20-year-old Nate. I think I was calling a girlfriend, maybe.
Sorry, Anne, how about you?
Yeah, I have a few, so I'll get to that one. But one of them is, like, when I was kind of coming up, there weren't a lot of women in leadership roles. And so when I was in graduate school, none of my professors were women. So that was a little bit weird. Another one is that there were a few times in my career where I really wasn't sure what the next step was. And that was kind of scary. So when I was finishing grad school, I wasn't really sure there was going to be a next step when I was finished. So that kind of anxiety can be a real thing. And that one, there have been points, was kind of exciting. There's been points in my career when I've had to sort of reinvent myself and learn new things. So I think I told you guys I was a coral biologist. And then I kind of decided to start learning about zooplankton. And I got myself to Antarctica to study zooplankton.
You know what zooplankton are?
So some of you do, I'm sure. But yeah, so the plankton are small animals that drift with the current, the zooplankton. So I study little animals that are crustaceans. So they're related to like shrimps and lobsters, but they're much smaller. And there's a lot of them.
So did you tell us what you were doing in Antarctica?
Yeah, so I went to Antarctica. Maybe this is a little diversion, but it's pretty cool. So we were studying the zooplankton, sort of at the base of the food chain. And you know, like in Antarctica, it's winter a lot of the year, so the growing season is really short. So I was interested in how those animals can really efficiently feed on the plant life in the ocean and store enough energy so that they could basically survive through the winter. So I was studying all the biology associated with that. But that was a big transition for me, so I had to like really learn a lot of new things.
How are we doing with women in oceanography today? Are there, once you get to the senior scientist level, are there a lot of women, or?
It's spotty, but some places it's great. I mean, and I can brag about my own institution. When I came to WHOI, I was so excited because there actually in the biology department are a lot of women on the staff, and it felt wonderful. It felt comfortable. I felt supported. I saw people who had small children. I saw people who took time to be with their families. And so there definitely are institutions like that. Our graduate students are majority female. So they really are coming up through the ranks, and in different institutions, the proportions will be different. But, you know, all kinds of diversity across the field, we have to work to maintain that, and we have to think about how to nurture different kinds of people coming into marine biology, but all STEM fields.
Brandon, we haven't heard from you yet. What are some of the challenges you faced in your career?
Yeah, similar to Ann, I think it related to my identity. So when I was coming in through grad school, there weren't a lot of people of color. And I was the only one, actually, for my master's matriculation. I was the only person of color in the entire college, the only student, faculty, et cetera. And so that sense of imposter syndrome, or, oh my gosh, did I make the right career choice? Am I qualified? You know, all those kinds of things kind of weigh in. And so we have made inroads, certainly in STEM, but there's a lot of work to do. And I think the stronger connections to institutions like historically black colleges, universities, or tribal colleges, or Hispanic-serving institutions, where there is a lot of innovation, a lot of expertise, and a lot of interest from students in the Earth system sciences, mainly ocean science, for this discussion, I think would do us well to break down those barriers of exclusion and include people that are really interested in this kind of work.
Absolutely. Any questions? Up, there's a hand going up. Peter, will you bring the microphone over?
Could you address the student debt that has accumulated? Every one of you has an advanced degree against what I assume is not the same pay rate as an orthopedic surgeon.
Sure, I'd
Take that.
I can talk about my debt. I don't have debt anymore, which is huge, but it's definitely something that exists. I think my entire cohort going through grad school and undergrad was the same deal. You know, all of us had some scholarships. We worked hard to get there, but universities are expensive, and it was a risk we took on that it might not be across the board true, but I know it was definitely helpful to have family support and know that should the worst happen, the very worst, if everything fell apart, I'd still have my family there to help me out. And that's a privilege that, you know, not everybody can. And it's one of the barriers to marine sciences. It's a competitive career you're not getting paid the salary of an orthopedic surgeon, so the payout's not necessarily as good in that respect. But it's doable. You know, I did undergraduate, took on loans. I did graduate school and took on loans, and I was able to work them off. And I just took on a new house loan, so let the games continue. But
yeah.
I will also say I think we're doing a little better as a community so I understand the college debt is a serious issue, but we are doing better about understanding that students need to support themselves often. And so when I was a student, it was expected that you might work for free, a free internship, and now it's much more understood. If people are working in your lab, you should be paying them. If they're doing an educational experience over the summer, that's a summer when maybe they would normally get a job, so you should be paying them. So that aspect really is changing.
I'm actually curious because I got a PhD as well, and one of the reasons I went for a PhD rather than getting a master's first was that I was paid the whole time I was getting a PhD. I didn't incur any debt. I was either on fellowships or I had a grant from NASA at one point. So I was able, and I taught while I was in graduate school, so that helped. And I did some research for a professor to get another stipend. But basically, I was able to get through my graduate degree without incurring any debt at all. Is that still true with science PhDs?
That does tend to be true with science PhDs.
Not true in the humanities, by the way, but in science, yeah. Any online questions? Danielle?
Yes, we're getting tons of great online questions. And the theme that I'm seeing is just really like people are asking, like, are there certain classes they should be taking in high school or undergraduate, after undergrad? Should they be looking for a master's program? What should they be looking into? And then as a follow-up question, how do they decide what to focus their research on? And should it be on something specific like cuttlefish, or should it be something more broad?
That's a lot of good questions.
Go ahead, Anne.
I'll start with one part of it in terms of what you should be focusing on for classes. I mean, sometimes you have to take some things you like taking, but I would say don't be afraid of the hard classes. So it's really important to build a solid foundation in really core science classes. So, in high school, you should be looking at, biology, chemistry, maybe the AP classes if they're available to you, calculus if it's available to you. As you go into college, you really want to think about a, rigorous STEM degree. And I think one of the things that Veronique mentioned is really important and exciting. There's a lot of opportunities for people who know how to handle data. And so don't be afraid of learning computer skills, coding skills, informatics, machine learning, all those kinds of things. Those skills, whether you continue to be a marine biologist or you go off and apply those in a whole bunch of other ways, I think those are really valuable to build.
Yeah, I'm going to add another angle, which is recognizing that there are multiple career options for earth and space scientists and certainly ocean scientists. So you could work across the street as a marine tech on one of the research vessels. That's part of the research enterprise. You can be, as Ann mentioned, a data scientist, or you can work for a federal agency. You can work for a nonprofit organization. There are so many options.
Communication.
You get communicate, exactly. And so deciding what you might want to do, then you kind of you could tailor your academic package or your class package around what it is you want to do. And recognize that, going straight through to a graduate degree may not be for everyone. If you're at a community college, you could learn some tech skills and come out and do just fine as well. So there are a lot of options out there.
Anything, Nate?
The last part about do I study cuttlefish? What I've seen time and time again, and I think you're an example of this, is my experience was that everybody who was going for their PhD and just approaching graduate school felt like whatever they chose was what they had to stick with. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's the case. It was something that I learned more through experience of seeing other people do it than myself exactly. But a little bit myself too. I work in a bioacoustics lab now. Before this was a coral reef lab. Anne was a coral reef biologist, ecologist, and now she's a plankton biologist, ecologist, right? Like you can switch it up, but those skill sets that you gain along the way are what's going to allow you to transition back and forth. So don't be too afraid about choosing the path that you have to stick with for forever, because there's more to it than just the way you start. Plenty of people switch their path along the way, and it's not necessarily to their detriment. Sometimes it's a benefit that they think differently than the people who are trained more classically in that field.
My degree was in ecology, and I actually wish I had taken more statistics. It would have been really, really good.
You can never take too much statistics.
Yeah, I know. The key is finding the right teacher. So. We could actually take one more question if you want, Danielle.
That's great. Grayson, who's 10 years old, wants to know, what's the deepest you've traveled underwater?
Oh, as a person or like virtual presence? Probably a whole person, right? I'm pretty sure I'm not the deepest, so I'll just start. I think the deepest I was about 900 feet. So I got to go in the submarine when I was at the University of Hawaii, and we went to a deep water coral reef. And it was one of the coolest things I've ever gotten to do in my life, because I'd been a coral reef scientist studying scuba diving, and then to go into those sort of continuation of that environment, it was magical. And the most magical thing I saw was the submarine pilot. He went up to this one coral and he said, "Watch this." And he turned off the lights and he just tapped it with the arm of the sub, and it luminesced this like bright electric blue. It was magic.
So,
yeah, Brandon.
So
you're going to be the winner, I think. So, yeah.
I don't have a submarine story, unfortunately, so I'm limited to recreational diving limits, which I have pushed slightly. I think it's 130 is what you're supposed to go to as a diver, and I think I got 135 under my belt, which is not to say you should push it, but that's how it ended up on that dive. Amazing stuff to see. This was off of California, and there were these purple hydrocoral that didn't exist anywhere else around the island I was living on, except at this deep water pinnacle. But my deep water experience, as cool as it was was only 130 feet. Now you can go, Brandon.
The setup, right? So I've been fortunate to dive on the Alvin twice, and so to the hydrothermal vents at 9 degrees north out in the Pacific. And so the deepest, I think, was over 8,000 feet. So it's over 1.5 miles straight down.
And how long does it take to get down 1.5 miles?
It takes, so the pilots, we don't drive down. They intake water and there's weights. So you sink down to reserve battery power. So once you're down at the vent, you can have the power to do the work. And so it takes about 1.5 hours to get all the way down to the bottom. And it's life-changing because the pilot, both times, probably a foot before we settled, he's like, all right, we're going to hit. And you feel yourself hit the bottom and you realize, I'm at the bottom of the ocean. And I have to use the bathroom. And we could talk about that later. We won't talk about it now. But it was fascinating, life-changing, and all of those things. And I think that's a picture of me in front of the sub with a good friend of mine, Anna Detail, who worked in the lab. And that's me getting in the sub. And some folks may recognize one of the Alvin pilots, Blee Williams, there was assisting me.
All right, well, that's actually a nice segue into our next section of the conversation. So I want to get from the challenges to the good stuff. So what's your favorite part of your job? And let's start with you.
So, okay, it's a little weird, but my favorite part is, you know how like sometimes you're like, oh, I'm working too hard, whatever. Sometimes that can be really exhausting, but sometimes it can be really exciting when you're just like so into something. Like if you have a project or a deadline and you're just like living it, breathing it. So in that case, we were at sea. And so when you're at sea, like you are living it, breathing it, you're there all the time. Other time that happened to me, one other time was during the early days of the pandemic. I was writing this like giant proposal, and I was wearing the same bathrobe like all day for 2 weeks. Like but you when you're just immersed in your work.
Immersed / slightly obsessed.
A little gross.
Yeah. Brandon, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's collaborating with other volunteer leaders at AGU to really think about what's needed for the next 10, 20, 50 years in science, in Earth and space sciences. And not just with the leaders internally at AGU, but also working with other organizations. So I think I was on a panel with the president of University of Maryland, Baltimore campus, the president and CEO of the Sloan Foundation, Adam Falk. That's the provost from University of Minnesota, Rachel. And we were just kind of ideating, that's a cute word. We were just kind of brainstorming about what is needed to support the next generation of scientists, current generation of scientists, and what do academic institutions, federal agencies, and professional societies need to think about for the future to support science. So that's really invigorating.
Big picture. And Nate, how about you?
For me, there's a lot of different parts about the job that are really fun. But the romantic side of all the field work that initially got me interested in marine science is still very much one of my favorite things. I've got an awesome smattering here of field work, but some of the cool things, like that photo in the top left with that Goliath grouper, big 300-pound fish, we weren't there to look at Goliath grouper. We were surveying the coral reef, and on the way back to the boat, man, there was a huge fish under the boat. Like, I love those experiences of being immersed in your environment, the area you're interested in anyway, and then the ocean throws some other new and unique experience at you that it's just kind of when you put yourself out there, you have the chance to have something cool happen. And I really enjoy that kind of unknown aspect of the job. It makes the field work really exciting. Worst case scenario, we just did our work that we came to, and I collected water samples in dry tortugas or tested out a prototype for a productivity meter, or took some water samples. All these different things are really fun to do on their own, but it's the added plus of the unknown of what will happen when we're in the field that is for me the most exciting part of the job.
Absolutely. Is there a moment in your career that so far that you've been particularly proud of, Nate?
We were kind of thinking about this before, and I think for me when I was most proud of myself at what I'd done thus far was when I started getting to collaborate with some of the professors I'd had in graduate school. Working across the street from University of Miami, where I'd done grad school, I ended up getting to collaborate with two of the professors who helped kind of guide me along my path in coral restoration and coral biology. So getting to be on papers with them and on proposals with them was a really exciting moment for me to kind of be like, yes, did it. I'm a marine biologist.
Yeah. How about, sorry, let's see, I've lost track where I am here. And I think you're up next.
It's a little bit of a similar feeling. So it's about that same thing when I switched from the coral reef work and started working with plankton. I mean, I'm at Woods Hole Oceanographic. There are people who go to sea all the time. They do all this hardcore stuff, and I was not one of them. I would be in my lab. I'd be doing some scuba, which is also hard. But I got to go on this cruise on a NOAA ship, the Oscar Dyson, in the Bering Sea, which is where they film like the deadliest catch. And we're on this ship, and I mean, it's like giant seas, and I have this like foul weather gear, and I felt like I am legit. I'm like here and enjoying it.
So Brandon, how about you?
So I already shared the Alvin story. So
that's right.
We already shared that. But I will leave this. I got to meet Bill Nye. I think yeah.
There we
so
go.
That right
awesome.
there, that's hands down one of the coolest moments ever.
Has anything in your career taken you by surprise? Maybe something you didn't expect to see yourself doing, or maybe something you've learned about yourself? Nate?
Yeah, for me, in my last position working at NOAA, the need arose for someone to be responsible for engineering some new sampling tools. I'd never engineered anything. I'd fixed my boat, I'd fixed my car. Not necessarily very well, but I tried. But as a function of the way the world's changed and the accessibility to like tutorials online and open source framework for just sharing technology and knowledge, it turns out that I can be an engineer, at least like a novice engineer. And I ended up working with a team there to develop a water sampler. And then we followed that up with a kind of an offshoot of that design with an eDNA sampler. And I've just kind of run with that. So out of nowhere, I went from just marine biologist to a marine biologist who can also do a bunch of engineering tasks. And here we built a semi-portable large animal flume respirometer in the Azores. We had to come up with a design here, and then we just built it over there. No big deal.
All right, whoa. Flume respirometer? What's that?
So what it is, it's a large swimming chamber, essentially. That circular design allows the animal, in theory, to swim all the way around. What we did instead was took an outboard motor, stuck it into that circle that you see cut out by where I'm drilling stuff in, and we were able to create a flow so the animal didn't have to swim around. It could stay in a set part of the chamber. And then by sealing up the entire device, we were able to measure oxygen levels as they changed while the animal was swimming. So we crank that motor up, water flow goes up, the animal swims harder, and we can start figuring out metabolic restraints of the animal. In this case, it were these veined squid out in the Azores, which are a common squid for the location, but they're about 1 meter long. And we stuck them in here and tried swimming them basically on this underwater treadmill to better understand how this animal that's a linchpin of the food chain out there, to understand what its energetic needs are, so we could better understand how its role in the environment works. So we needed a flume respirometer to do it, so we built one. Pretty fun, actually.
Anne, how about you? Any surprises in your career?
Yeah, so one thing that happens to you as you go along in your career, almost no matter what it is you end up being in charge of other people. And sometimes you have to have difficult conversations. And this is not a difficult conversation. It's a lovely person. But, I mean, sometimes you have to tell people they're not really doing what they should be doing or things aren't going well. And I was terrified to do that because we don't get training to do that. And so I always thought I was bad at it. And eventually I got a little training and I learned more and I realized that it was actually something that was a little bit of a strength. And now, especially in my role as Associate Dean, I do a lot of trying to help students and faculty kind of navigate relationships and get through, difficult times. So that's something I ended up enjoying doing.
Great. Brandon.
Yeah, I would say that the biggest surprise for me is that individuals along my trajectory had more confidence in me than I had in myself. They saw whatever, I don't know what they saw, but they saw something and they were able to pour into me, able to mentor me or coach me or what have you. So what you see on the person you see on the left is both my master's and PhD advisor, Chuck Epifanio. As I mentioned before, my master's degree, I was was isolated and things of that nature, but he was a great advisor. We had a great lab, and so much so he kept tabs on me once I finished my master's and was teaching high school. He coaxed me back into working on my PhD in his lab. So he's like a true friend. On the right, so that's like professional pouring into. On the personal side is Dr. Ambrose Gerald. The Ambrose Gerald lecturer is here at Woods Hole. He was here working in NOAA for 40 years or something like that. Strong mentor, great friend, but personally has always kind of guided me from, not in a demonstrative way, but he knew where I needed to go, when I needed to go, how I needed to speak up, and all these kinds of things. So these two individuals really have been a key part in my career.
Mentors and role models, so important. Let's take some more questions. Kathy, yeah.
Hi. So I know that your careers have gone many different places, but what were your original majors in undergraduate and then also in your graduate careers?
Let's go down the line. Nate,
Sure.
Go ahead.
Sure. So I started off, at the time, I honestly, I don't know if the program has it now, but Northeastern at the time I went did not have a marine biology degree. They had a marine biology concentration with a biology degree, which was part of the reason I went, because I figured worst case, I have a biology degree, right? But I did stick with that concentration aspect, and it worked out for me. For graduate school, I went back in their marine affairs and policy program with an aquaculture focus, with the intention of coral aquaculture as my focus. But yeah, luckily in both instances, it kind of worked out.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, so for undergrad, I was a biology major, but university didn't have a marine program. So my degree was in just biology. I was in the pre-med track. But for for graduate school, it was marine biology and biochemistry. So both the degrees, master's and PhD in that area.
My undergrad, the marine science degree was you had to double major, so it was marine science and biology. But I also had in the back of my mind that it was pretty much a pre-med degree, just in case. And my graduate work was oceanography.
Anybody else? Yeah, Danielle, go ahead.
Yes, hi. We have several folks wondering, how do they build their network? How do they make connections so they can take their career path forward?
Great question.
Yeah, I would just say take advantage of opportunities. I think that's the best piece of advice I try to give people is ideally get paid for your opportunities, but worst case scenario, volunteer your time as an investment in your future if you can, because those little inroads to a lab or to a teacher or professor or connections that you don't even see coming can make a huge difference. And for me, my network has almost certainly come from taking advantage of experiences, and that's probably the best piece of advice I think I could give is do everything you can.
I'd also say just try to summon up that, what do they say, 8 seconds of courage or whatever. Like if you're in a room with someone and you're in a room next to Brandon and you really want to meet him, you can introduce yourself and you can say something. I mean, some of my biggest opportunities are because I was just a little bit brave to cold call someone or, just really take that step to try and make a contact.
Yeah, and you never know how a contact is going to play out. I had the experience of, before this life, I worked as a public radio reporter, and so I really wanted to get into NPR in D.C., and I went and I introduced myself, and I talked with a woman who was an editor on the science desk, and she's like, yeah, I'd love to help you, but because you're not in graduate school, I can't even give you an internship or anything. And then I ended up getting a job in St. Louis working as a public radio reporter, and I ran into that same editor at a workshop. And at that point, I started freelancing for her. And so you just never know how a connection that you make one day, even if that person can't help you that day, still talk about your interests, share what you're passionate about, and you never know how it's going to play out down the line. Any more questions, Danielle?
We do. We have hundreds of questions. Christine is asking, is there a specific area of study that is in demand right now for marine biologists? And as a follow-on, Kathy wants to know, do you think there are particular areas that need attention?
Oh, man. Our world needs scientists, right? And we were just talking about at our institution, we need people with all kinds of talent, right? We need people to help in communications, help support our computer systems, help support our ship-going operations. So all kinds of things. Do you guys have some ideas about types of science?
So I was going to say science communication, and I was going to say the social sciences. And the reason I'm thinking of that is because as we're moving into the applied part of science, or science that's societally relevant, or science for solutions, there's going to have to be a lot of nuanced conversations with decision makers and community groups and the general public about the importance of science and the work, for instance, that goes on here at WHOI, and how that can help society. And given what goes on in social media and a lot of conversations around what scientists see as just like fundamental things that shouldn't be discussed or questioned, we need to connect with our social science colleagues to kind of figure out, okay, how do we walk in these worlds? How do we have these kind of conversations? How do we have these kind of tough conversations to let people know that the science is useful and we're here to help as scientists?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of distrust of science right now, at least in the U.S. and probably other places. And being able to rebuild that confidence in science, I think, is important. Any other questions? Danielle, go ahead.
Yes. So again, several questions are on really how much time do you spend in the water, out in the field, compared to the lab or doing paperwork?
Nowadays, I mean, it was different when I was younger, I'll say that. I mean, nowadays, I think I spent about a total of a month in the field over the past year. So that's about, about 10% of my time. Some of that was maybe more. I spent maybe 3 weeks on a cruise, and then I did several one-day expeditions. And then in my actual lab, I'm probably in my actual lab maybe 1 day a week. Mostly, again, working with other, like at the bench, like actually working on samples. But most of the time, honestly, it is administrative for me. But that was quite different when I was earlier in my career.
Yeah, and the field season typically is not year-round. Some researchers are diversified enough that maybe they have research that can constantly be done in the field, but at some point, you're going to have to stop and analyze the data that you've been collecting. You're going to have to kind of pay the bills for your research. You don't just get to play in the field. I think Anne's assessment's pretty good. My job is a large portion field work, and I still think it's probably 2 months of the year that I'm in the field, and the rest of it is in the lab, either prepping for field work or dealing with the data collected from that field work.
I think it depends on what kind of ocean science you do. I know there are lots of people at WHOI who spend months out at sea every year, so it sort of depends. I don't know, I see Tim Shank, he's another scientist here at WHOI. How much time do you spend in the field?
Cruises. I'm sorry. Yeah, I just got on my phone to calculate the number of cruises. I just had to add it up. I'm at 71 right now, expeditions, and it's over 4 years at sea for me in the last 23 years.
So in a given year, though, how much time would you be at sea?
It's anywhere from 1 to 4 months, usually 2 to 3.
Oh, just depends.
And Tim, how deep have you gone?
Oh, that's not fair. I had the privilege of going out with Alvin last August on its first mission for science after it had completed an upgrade to 6,500 meters. So I think I have the deepest science dive at 6,330 meters, or over 4.5 miles.
Wow.
Thanks, Danielle.
We could take one more question from online, Danielle. And I encourage all of you in the room to ask a question if you've got one. Sure.
So one of the things that kept coming up over and over again when we were promoting this event, we got so many wonderful comments, and there was great threads about, oh, it's always been my dream to be a marine biologist, but my career took me a different way, or I was told as a woman that I can't be a marine biologist, and I'm near retirement now, but it's my passion. I mean, what do you say to so many folks that that's been their dream and they still have such a passion? Is there a way that they can still contribute to marine biology?
Yeah, there's tons of ways. So there are a lot. I mean, the thing that's coming to mind for me is volunteer opportunities, and there's tons of them. So when I was a graduate student, I was a docent at the aquarium, and that's a great thing. And I mean, I'm thinking about if you have a little bit of science training, maybe in a different science, the science fair is always looking for mentors. I mean, there's ways to work with young people who are interested in marine science. You know, at WHOI, and it doesn't have to be WHOI, all kinds of places, we're looking for volunteers to help give tours around the institution. And yeah, I think there's all kinds of ways to get involved.
Yeah, I'm wondering about the regional chapters of some professional societies, and where individuals can become kind of associate members and attend some of those meetings, or even if they wanted to be full. For instance, at AGU, you don't have to be a scientist to be a member. Pay your membership fee and pay a registration fee and come to the meeting or things of that nature. So anyone can expand their network, learn about the cutting edge of science, and still be involved in that way. And you never know who you might meet.
I just thought of something else. There's a lot of great citizen science programs out there, and those can be so fun. I mean, things where you're helping to count herring at the herring run, or helping to identify things, or, I mean, all different kinds of things. Bioblitzes, where they go out and try and identify as many organisms from a parcel of land in a day. I mean, all that stuff is important and fun.
All right, we're almost out of time, but I'd like to end with one last question for each of you, which is kind of related to that question that Danielle just shared. So we have a lot of students in the audience here in Redfield, and I'm sure online as well. What advice would you give a young person who might be interested in pursuing a marine biology career, or just getting started, or should they go for it, for one thing, and what could help them succeed? Do you have any advice?
Yeah, I think it's great to go for it, and maybe to be really open-minded about what success would look like for you. There's a whole, we've talked about, there's a whole range of different routes to a marine science or marine biology career. So I would say, you know, follow the path that interests you, but, you know, really keep your eyes open for opportunities.
Nate?
Yeah, the opportunities thing, I kind of mentioned that earlier. Just do everything you can. I had a really useful piece of inspirational advice from my dad when I was at high school age, trying to figure out what I was going to do next, and struggling, probably like some of you are. What do I do with my career? And he's like, well, you don't have to know what you're going to do for the rest of your life right now. It's not a big deal. A lot of people don't. You're very lucky if you do know that. But you do have to do something. And I don't think he was just trying to kick me out of the house. Like, he was just saying, just don't sit on your hands. Do something. And any experience is going to be a valuable experience. Might not be the one that you run with for your career, but it'll be a valuable experience. So get out there and take advantage of those things. And one way or another, you know, your destiny will wind its way through, and you'll figure it out.
Brandon will give you the last word.
Oh boy, it's hard to follow. Destiny, yeah. That's, I would say don't be afraid to fail, because it's going to happen. Don't be shy about trying new things, mustering up that 8 seconds of courage to introduce yourself to someone, recognizing all of your options. And when you do stumble, because you will, just learn from that and recognize that's part of the process that you need to go through. That's a skill, just like any other skill that you're going to learn, because trust me, I fumble every day on my day job and my volunteer work with AGU. But there are trusted people that are on your team, and you learn from it, so you don't make that mistake again. And you just kind of hone what you need to do, and you move forward.
I'll just add that for everyone who registered for tonight's event, whether you're in the room or online, please be on the lookout for an email from WHOI in the next few days. We are going to be sending out some helpful resources for students who might be interested in exploring a career in marine biology, so keep your eyes open for that. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for tonight. I want to say a big, big thank you to Brandon Jones, Ann Tarrant, and Nate Formel for joining us to talk about their fascinating careers. I want to say thank you also to my WHOI colleagues who've been working very hard, both here in the room with me and behind the scenes, to make this event possible. And to everyone who joined us here at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and, of course, on Zoom, thank you very much. Tonight's event was the 6th and final event of our 5th series of WHOI's Ocean Encounters. Please watch our website, whoi.edu, for more information about Season 6, which will kick off at the beginning of next year. In the meantime, you might want to take a look at some of the very cool merchandise at WHOI's online store. That's shop.whoi.edu. You get 15% off just for joining us tonight. Just type in the discount code CAREERS. If you enjoyed tonight's Ocean Encounters program, you can be part of WHOI's solution-based approach to ocean science. If you're already a WHOI member, thank you very much. If not, please consider joining. You'll be providing crucial support for our outreach and our science, and you'll get some great benefits in return. Memberships start at just $40 a year. The average gift is $120, but any amount helps. Your support will make a difference. On behalf of Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, thank you and good night.